Okay, you might want to settle in because we've got a lot of books to talk about today. I want to go over my July reading wrap up, which I know is a bit late, but better late than never. And I also want to talk about the books that I'm hoping to read in August, which is mostly just going to be me going over the Booker Prize long list and picking out the books that I think sound really cool from that. So to get started, last month I read 7 books, which is the most I've actually read in 1 month in a really long time. And because of that, I have had to pull up my Fable list so I don't forget any of the books that I read. So the first book that I read last month was A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I did do a full video on this, which you can see if you just go to my shorts. I know that this book is really divisive, and I was worried coming into it because I've heard how relentlessly sad and traumatic it is. And I know that some people either really, really love it or really, really hate it. I fell into that first camp. I did really, really love it. Yes, it is relentlessly sad and incredibly painful to read. I actually had to limit myself to an hour a day of reading it because it was just getting too emotional. But there's also so much heart and beauty, and there's some really great personal stories in there, and I just thought it was, in the end, a really beautiful novel that I will never ever read again. After that, I read Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This year, I'm on a bit of a mission because I finally got really into high fantasy last year, and I'm trying to start all of those big series that so many people really, really love. So obviously, the Farseer saga has to be part of that. People love Hobb's writing, and I did really enjoy it as well. I loved the world building and the characters and the way things are going, like the way things are turning out to be. I think my only critique of Assassin's Apprentice specifically is that it felt so setup heavy. It felt too much like a book one, even to the point where it maybe just felt like a book length prologue to what's coming. I felt like I didn't really get that much of a self-contained story. But with that said, I did really love it, and I actually cannot wait to carry on with that series. Speaking of high fantasy though, I also read The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, which is book 3 in the Mistborn saga. I loved these books. I don't think I've loved a high fantasy series as much since I read the Bloodsworn saga by John Gwynne for the first time. It's hard to kind of give you a full review of what I felt with The Hero of Ages without giving away too much of books 1 and 2. But what I did really love is that we got deeper into the lore. We got all the answers that we were looking for, and we, met new characters, learned more about existing characters that we already loved. It felt like a really perfect conclusion to me. I really, really enjoyed it, and I see why people love Brandon Sanderson so much because I'm definitely really excited to read more from him. I'm hoping to pick up the Stormlight Archive later this year. Moving on from high fantasy and back into a general fiction kind of place, the next book that I read was I completely forgot what it was, even though I literally just read it on my phone. The next book that I read was The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. I really enjoyed this book. This is the second Ishiguro novel that I've ever read. The first one was Never Let Me Go, and these books both do sort of similar things of you've got the story that's happening in front of you, the narrative you're being told, and then there's this much larger story kind of happening in the background that you kind of infer and pick up in small sections. The Remains of the Day is told to us in the style of a journal written by Mr. Stevens, who is a butler working for Lord Darlington in this grand country manor, and he's on this road trip through England, and in the journal he's telling us stories about what happened with him and other staff at Darlington House, or this big manor, in the time period between World War I and World War II. And that bigger story of happening in the background is this story of Mr. Darlington, who seems to be very involved in politics during that time period, and how that kind of led to a lot of things that happened during World War II, or even led to beginnings of World War II. It still stays kind of vague, but it's really interesting. And then the smaller story that's happening that you're actually reading is Mr. Stevens, who is currently working in a very understaffed manner for a new employer, but in the same house. He's hoping that he can go and convince an ex-staff member to come back. The next book I read was The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. I really enjoyed this novel. I think one thing that I loved most about it is that Mandel, or St. John Mandel, does really interesting things with timelines. She doesn't really tell you the story in sort of a straightforward timeline narrative. It's a lot more complicated, and you get to sort of piece these things together as they're happening. This book takes place partly in a hotel in rural Canada, but it's mostly about people who either worked there or visited there and what sort of happens to their lives after they've been there. I've not read that much from Emily St. John Mandel before. I have read one novel, but admittedly, I cannot remember which one it was. It might have been Station 11, but I'm not totally sure. I do like the way that she writes, and I'm definitely wanting to read more from her. The main book that I was actually really excited about last month was Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I've had this book for so long, and I've been kind of putting off reading it because I kind of just assumed it would be a nice romance, so I wasn't that enthused. I thought it would be something along the lines of, you know, Pride and Prejudice or Emma or something like that, where it was just a bit more fluffy and lovey, which absolutely no problem for. I really enjoy those novels, but it wasn't something that was really gripping to me. I should have known better, and I should have known that a Bronte was going to give me a really weird book, because I got the weirdest book. Jane Eyre is such an interesting story, and so much happens that something that you'd expect to be a massive plot point ends up being quite a small, like, note along the journey of Jane Eyre's life. And I really enjoyed that. It reminded me of, you know, like in Hamlet, where like he's kidnapped by pirates or something, and it's such a minor part of the book that you barely even think about it. It reminded me of that. There's so many strange moments that happen in Jane Eyre, and you're like, how is this being like ignored? How are we just moving on from this? And then what else is coming? What's gonna happen? And this wasn't on purpose. This was completely by accident. But at the same time as reading Jane Eyre, I was reading Victorian Psycho by Virginia Feytaud, which is inspired by Jane Eyre and is kind of like an insane horror version of Jane Eyre. And I only picked it up because I wanted to read the book before the movie comes out, because the movie looks really cool. But yeah, in Victorian Psycho, we follow another what are they called? Everyone's screaming at me, I can tell. Wait, I'm literally gonna have to look this up because I've completely forgotten. Governess, okay. So in Victorian Psycho, we follow another governess who is working at another large country manor. I think large country manors seem to be a theme of last month. But this one's insane, and she wants to kill everyone, basically, as the name would suggest. But it's just a really fun, ridiculous, campy story, and I just had a great time. Again, I'm really looking forward to the movie. Okay, so now we've covered all the books that I read last month. I want to talk about the books that I hope to read in August. And a lot of this is going to be Booker Prize long list stuff, because I really want to read as many of them as I can before the winner is announced. I'm actually already one down. So the other day I finished reading The End of Everything by M. John Harrison, which is another divisive one. It has some really, really mixed reviews. It's a strange book. We mostly follow two characters who are living at the coastline of the English Channel, basically after the end of the world. No one seems quite understand what happened, but everything is weird. And it feels like someone is describing a dream to you. I still haven't decided whether I enjoyed it or not. I think it's one of those books where you kind of really got to talk through it with someone to figure out what you feel. I don't know. I found it very interesting. And if this is any indication of what the rest of the Booker Prize is going to be like this year, then we're in for a weird ride of weird books. The next book that I do really want to read this month is Helen of Nowhere by McKenna Goodman. I was grateful enough to receive a copy from Fritz Coraldo to help me with my Booker Prize challenge. So obviously this book is also on the Booker list. So it's set in the countryside of a realtor showing a disgraced professor around an idyllic house. As she's going through the house and they're talking about it, she also includes lots of stories about the former owner, Helen, who seems to still be very entrenched within this house and within the space. And something about the way that Helen lived seems to heavily affect the disgraced professor. And that's kind of all I know right now, but I'm actually super looking forward to this. Another one from the book list that I'm really looking forward to is The Vivisectors by Missouri Williams. I have it up on my phone, like the Booker Prize article about it. So part of the blurb is, in a famed but crumbling university city overrun by vegetation, where power is held in a fragile balance between the academics and a contingent of rogue gardeners, Agathe spends her days listlessly propping up the career of her fraudulent professor boss. How insane. Like, I think the Booker Prize has gone a little bit crazy this year, and I'm actually so into it. So I'm definitely looking forward to reading that one. Another one that is on the list that sounds so exciting to me is May We Feed the King by Rebecca Perry. So again, I've got the Booker Prize article here. So it says, she is a curator who spends her time dressing the rooms of historic buildings to bring them to life. But in the lush private quarters of a medieval palace, she finds herself so transfixed by the reign of an almost forgotten king that the edges of her life begin to blur. Number one, again, sounds insane, sounds dreamlike, really into it. Number two, I really enjoy medieval stuff. I'm such like boy fantasy guy. I just love medieval. I'm hoping there's kings and knights and all that kind of nonsense. So I'm really looking forward to whatever the hell that is going to be. That is the main books on the bucket list that I'm really excited to read. I am hoping to read as many of them as possible. I mean, there's 13, and I just had the best reading month of years, and that was only 7. So I'm not trying to get my hopes up too high, but I'm hoping to read as many as I possibly can. But whilst I was actually waiting for Helen of Nowhere to arrive, I started reading Malice by John Gwynne. I mentioned John Gwynne earlier. He's the author of the Bloodsworn saga, and I started reading his debut fantasy series a couple of days ago. I'm at that point where I'm still kind of in the heavy world building. It's taken me a couple of days, and I'm only about 100 pages in, which would normally be like a couple hours work. But high fantasy always takes a little bit of time to get into. You got a lot of world building and rules to learn, you know? So I am really enjoying that. I may have to put a pause on it to read Helen of Nowhere, or maybe I'll just like power through Malice as quickly as I can and try and get back on track with the Booker Prize list. Who knows? I've also started listening to the audiobook of Red Rising by Pierce Brown because everyone is always talking about it. Like, if you look at any high fantasy readers on BookTok or Instagram or YouTube or wherever, you'll find them talking about Red Rising or the Red Rising series. So I'm really excited about that. Again, I'm like just getting past the exposition and the world building, and I'm getting to kind of a dark place, which I assume, from what I can tell, all of it is kind of a dark place, but I'm having a really good time with that. So I guess we will see what happens there. So yeah, that was my reading wrap up and some of my hopefuls for this month. Thank you for sitting there and listening to me yap about books for 20 minutes. And do people still say like and subscribe? I have no idea. But please do.